Today I want to tell you a very long and moving story about a great leader from long ago named Moses and about his sons. Moses was a man chosen by God to lead his people, and his life was full of miracles, great challenges, and important lessons. But like many great stories from the past, not everything ended happily. In this tale, we are going to explore the tragic end of Moses' sons. We will learn about who they were, what they went through, and how their lives connect with the lessons we can learn about family, choices, and the consequences of our actions. Moses was a very important man in the history of his people. He led them out of a land of suffering into a new land of promise. He talked with God, performed many miracles, and helped shape the laws and ways of his people. But Moses' life was not only about leading an entire nation, it was also about his family. Moses was married to a woman named Zipporah, and together they had two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Although the Bible tells us only a little about the details of their lives, later traditions and interpretations have given us hints and ideas about the challenges and hardships that Moses' sons might have faced. Today we are going to share a story that imagines and explains the tragic end of Moses' sons, a story that has been passed down in many ways over the centuries and that continues to speak to us about the nature of legacy, responsibility, and the sometimes painful consequences of great destinies. Let us begin by looking at the life and times of Moses' family. Moses, chosen by God to free his people, carried a heavy burden. He was not only responsible for the salvation of his nation, but also for setting an example of faith and obedience. In his personal life, Moses had to balance his divine mission with the demands of being a husband and a father. His wife, Zipporah, was a strong and caring woman who supported him in his tasks, and together they raised their two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Their names mean "a stranger there" and "God is my help," respectively, and even their names remind us of the challenges and the hope that surrounded Moses' life. The life of Gershom. Gershom, the firstborn son of Moses and Zipporah, carries a name that means "a stranger there." From the very beginning, his life was closely connected with themes of displacement, a sense of not entirely belonging. Unlike many biblical figures whose paths were clearly marked by divine purpose or heroic deeds, Gershom's journey was far more subdued and uncertain. While his father, Moses, was at the forefront of one of history's most defining moments, leading the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage, Gershom's life was spent largely in the shadows, trying to navigate his place in a world where he was neither fully Midianite nor fully Israelite. Born into an era of miraculous events and divine intervention, Gershom's early years were overshadowed by the weight of his father's destiny. Moses, chosen by God to lead an entire nation, spent his time divided between communing with the divine, resolving disputes among his people, and guiding them through the harsh realities of the wilderness. This left little room for fatherhood, and Gershom, though the son of a revered prophet, grew up with a distant father, more often engaged in his divine mission than in his domestic responsibilities. The few biblical references to Gershom suggest a life of quiet struggle, where expectations loomed large but personal fulfillment was difficult to grasp. His name itself, "a stranger there," seemed to define his identity in a way that never quite allowed him to settle. Raised among a people who saw his father as their savior, he found himself constantly measured against an impossible standard. He was expected to be a leader, yet he had neither the divine calling nor the personal ambition that had propelled Moses forward. His story is one of attempting to carve out a unique space for himself while living in the immense shadow of greatness. Unlike his brother Eleazar, who bore a name promising divine assistance, Gershom's name reflected the feeling of alienation that defined much of his existence. He was caught between two cultures, the Midianite heritage of his mother and the Israelite identity of his father. Though he was of Moses' lineage, He never held the same level of recognition or reverence as those who followed directly in the footsteps of great leaders. Instead, his was a quieter path, one marked by introspection and the continual search for belonging. As Gershom grew, he was taught the laws and commandments that his father had received from God, and he tried to live by them. However, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. The people of Israel, ever demanding and restless, saw Moses as their intermediary between themselves and God. Gershom, on the other hand, was merely the son of this great leader, someone expected to uphold his father's legacy without ever truly being given the opportunity to establish his own identity. He wrestled with the burdens of expectation and the struggles of being seen as an extension of Moses rather than as an individual in his own right. While many leaders of Israel found their purpose through divine calling or acts of courage, Gershom's life remained largely unremarkable in the public eye. Yet his struggles were no less real. Some extra-biblical traditions suggest that he sought a life of quiet contemplation, desiring peace rather than power. Unlike Joshua, who rose to become the next leader of Israel, or the priests who took on the mantle of religious service, Gershom's path was one of inner turmoil. The expectation to live up to Moses' greatness left him feeling out of place, unable to reconcile his personal aspirations with the role imposed upon him. As the years passed, Gershom found himself increasingly isolated. Some accounts suggest that he was drawn into the turbulence of Israel's political struggles, though he was never truly embraced as a leader. He watched as the people wavered between faithfulness and rebellion, their loyalties shifting, their hearts torn between the promise of the land ahead and the hardships of the wilderness. Many stories hint that Gershom lived with the constant pressure of comparison, never quite living up to his father's name, yet always expected to be an embodiment of his legacy. One of the most poignant aspects of Gershom's life is the underlying sense of loneliness that permeates his story. His father was revered, his brother carried a name that promised divine assistance, and yet Gershom was marked by displacement. In some traditions, it is said that he struggled with feelings of unworthiness and self-doubt. Perhaps he questioned why he was born into a family of such significance if he was never meant to play a pivotal role. Perhaps he longed for a simpler existence, one free from the expectations that bound him to a path he did not choose. Toward the end of his life, some ancient writings suggest that Gershom sought reconciliation and peace, attempting to find his own way among the people of Israel. Yet the path was fraught with misunderstanding and disappointment. The weight of his lineage, the expectations placed upon him, and the challenges of forging his own identity proved overwhelming. While Moses left behind a legacy that shaped the course of history, Gershom's story faded into obscurity, a quiet testament to the struggle of those who live in the shadows of greatness. His name, a stranger there, ultimately became his reality. He was never quite at home among the people, always searching for acceptance but never fully finding it. His life serves as a poignant reminder that even those born into greatness must find their own place in the world, and that without the support and understanding of those around them, even the strongest can feel lost. In the end, Gershom's story is one of quiet tragedy. He was a man who longed for recognition, yet found himself caught in the tides of expectation and comparison. His struggles, though different from those of his father, were no less significant. They reflect the deep human need for identity, belonging, and purpose, a need that, for Gershom, remained unfulfilled. Yet there is something deeply human in his story. He was not a warrior, not a prophet, not a ruler, but he was a man who felt, who struggled, and who sought meaning in a world that often overlooked him. And in that, Gershom represents all those who have ever felt like strangers in their own lives, searching for a place where they truly belong. The life of Eliezer. Eliezer, the younger son of Moses and Zipporah, bears a name that holds a powerful meaning: God is my help. This name, filled with promise and divine assurance, suggests that Eliezer's life would be one of guidance and sustenance through the providence of God. It symbolizes an ever-present hope that even in the darkest moments, divine help is near. Yet, as history and tradition tell us, Eliezer's life was not without its trials and tribulations. Like so many who live under the weight of great expectations, his journey was one marked by struggle, disappointment, and, ultimately, sorrow. From his earliest days, Eliezer grew up in a world filled with grand expectations. As the son of Moses, the greatest prophet of Israel, he was born into a legacy of divine miracles, profound leadership, and transformative change. His father had led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, stood before Pharaoh with unwavering resolve, and witnessed the power of God split the Red Sea in two. The people of Israel looked to Moses as their deliverer, a man who communed with the Almighty and received divine law upon Mount Sinai. In this extraordinary backdrop, Eliezer's name alone carried significant meaning. "God is my help" was a phrase that resonated deeply with the Israelites, who, after years of oppression, had finally been freed. It was a reminder that they were not abandoned, that divine intervention was a constant in their journey. Yet, despite the power of his name, Eliezer's life was not one of privilege or ease. Instead, it was a life deeply impacted by hardship, internal conflict, and the unrelenting demands of a people searching for identity in the wilderness. As a child, Eliezer was raised in the shadow of greatness. His father, burdened with the leadership of an often ungrateful and rebellious people, had little time for personal family life. Moses was a man called to serve a nation, and his own household often took a secondary role to the divine mission set before him. Eliezer's mother, Zipporah, a Midianite woman of great strength and wisdom, did her best to raise him with love and guidance. But even she found herself caught between the immense responsibilities of her husband and the cultural divide that existed between the Israelites and her own people. While Moses' elder son, Gershom, is often described as struggling with feelings of alienation, Eliezer faced different battles. He grew up amidst the tensions of an emerging nation, one that was constantly in turmoil, wavering between faith and doubt. He witnessed the anger of the people as they wandered through the desert, complaining about food, water, and leadership. He saw their worship of the golden calf, their repeated disobedience, and the harsh consequences of their actions. Through it all, he was expected to remain steadfast, a beacon of faith and strength, living up to the meaning of his name. But Eliezer was not immune to human frailty. Some extra-biblical traditions tell us that he was a man who struggled deeply with anger and despair. He was not merely a passive observer of Israel's difficulties. He was actively involved, trying to mediate between conflicting factions, attempting to restore peace where discord reigned. Yet despite his efforts, he was often met with resistance, his wisdom ignored, and his intentions misunderstood. In many ways, his struggle mirrored that of his father, who tirelessly led a stubborn and oftentimes ungrateful people. However, unlike Moses, who was divinely supported in his leadership, Eliezer bore his burdens largely alone. Eliezer's inner turmoil only deepened as the years passed. As he saw the suffering of his people, he became disillusioned. The Israelites, despite witnessing miracle after miracle, continued to rebel and fall into strife. Promises of a prosperous future seemed distant, and the ideals that had once fueled hope were repeatedly shattered by human weakness. Some accounts suggest that Eliezer became weary of trying to uphold the expectations placed upon him. While his father was a man of legendary patience, Eliezer found himself growing bitter, questioning why divine help often seemed so distant despite his name's promise. In some ancient writings and oral traditions, the end of Eliezer's life is portrayed as a slow, painful decline. His faith, once strong and unwavering, began to waver under the weight of disappointment. He witnessed betrayal, infighting, and the corruption of those who sought power, rather than unity. Despite his efforts to guide his people and live up to the promise of his name, he found himself isolated, worn down by the harsh realities of the world. Unlike Moses, who passed away with the knowledge that he had fulfilled his divine mission, Eliezer's story is one of lingering sorrow. His life became a testament to the reality that faith alone is not always enough. It must be accompanied by action, understanding, and support from those around us. His tragic end serves as a sobering reminder that even the purest of hearts can be crushed by the weight of human failings. And yet, Eliezer's story is not just one of despair. It is also a lesson in resilience and the importance of striving for righteousness, even when faced with overwhelming adversity. His life teaches us that while divine help is ever present, it does not always come in the way we expect. Sometimes it is not a grand miracle or a parting sea, but rather the quiet strength to continue, the determination to seek peace, and the courage to stand firm, even when the world seems to be crumbling. In remembering Eliezer, we remember the struggles of all who seek to live a life of faith in a world filled with uncertainty. His journey, though marked by sorrow, is also a beacon for those who wrestle with doubt and discouragement. His name remains a reminder that even when divine help seems distant, it is never truly gone. It resides in the hearts of those who choose to keep moving forward, even when the path is fraught with difficulty. Ultimately, Eliezer's story calls upon us to be more than passive believers. It urges us to be active participants in bringing about the help that is so often sought. Whether through kindness, justice, or unwavering support for those in need, we can be the very help that others pray for. His life may not have been one of glory, but it was one of deep meaning. A life that continues to speak to those who struggle with faith, doubt, and the pursuit of hope in an often unforgiving world. The broader context: Moses, his family, and the burdens of leadership. In order to truly understand the tragic end of Moses' sons, it is important to consider the broader context of Moses' own life and the tremendous burdens he carried. Moses was not an ordinary man. He was chosen by God to free his people from the chains of slavery, to lead them through the wilderness, and to bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. His life was filled with miraculous events, parting seas, receiving the sacred laws on Mount Sinai, and guiding a nation through some of its darkest moments. Yet, for all his greatness and his closeness to God, Moses was also a man of deep human emotion. He experienced anger, sorrow, and frustration. He was not immune to the hardships of leadership. In many ways, the personal struggles that Moses faced were passed down, directly or indirectly, to his children. Gershom and Eliezer grew up in the light of their father's monumental achievements, but they also inherited the heavy burdens of expectation, the pain of witnessing conflict among the people, and the inevitable sense of isolation that comes from being born into a life of destiny and duty. Moses' own hardships, his encounters with the Pharaoh of Egypt, the constant complaints of the people, the trials in the wilderness, created an atmosphere in which his sons were raised. They saw their father, who was once a humble shepherd, become a legendary leader, yet also struggle with moments of doubt and despair. This complex legacy, with its mix of triumph and tragedy, colored the lives of Gershom and Eliezer. In many ways, their personal fates were intertwined with the destiny of the entire nation of Israel, a nation that would later be marked by cycles of hope, rebellion, and sorrow. There are stories in extra-biblical literature and later interpretations that suggest Moses himself suffered great personal losses as a result of the heavy burdens of leadership. His inability to bring his people fully into the Promised Land, his personal moments of loneliness, and even the cost of his own emotional and spiritual struggles had repercussions for his family. For his sons, growing up in such an environment meant that they were never truly free from the pain of unmet expectations and the constant pressure of living up to an almost impossible legacy. Both Gershom and Eliezer, in their own ways, found themselves trying to step out from the shadow of their famous father, only to be confronted by the very human problems that had tormented Moses. Their attempts to forge their own identities were complicated by the demands of leadership, the divisions among the people, and the harsh realities of a world that was too often unforgiving. The tragic ends. Reflections on loss, isolation, and unfulfilled promises. Now let us reflect on the tragic end that befell Moses' sons, a sorrowful finale that echoes the struggles of their entire family. The term tragic here is used to describe not only the literal hardships they faced, but also the deep emotional and spiritual losses that marked the end of their journeys. Although the biblical texts offer only a few details about the final years of Gershom and Eliezer, later traditions and interpretations have expanded on these brief mentions to paint a fuller picture of their fates. For Gershom, whose very name means a stranger there, the tragedy lies in the endless search for belonging that was never fulfilled. As he grew older, Gershom struggled with the feeling that he did not truly have a place in the world, a sentiment that was intensified by the constant comparison to his great father. Some stories tell us that as time went on, Gershom became increasingly isolated, feeling disconnected from the people who revered Moses and from a community that always seemed to see him only as the son of a hero. His inner loneliness grew until it became a quiet, persistent sorrow that defined the remainder of his life. In these tales, Gershom's tragic end is not marked by a dramatic external catastrophe, but by the slow fading of hope, a life lived in the shadow of unfulfilled promise and deep, unrelieved isolation. Eliezer, on the other hand, whose name proclaims, "God is my help," found that even a promise of divine assistance could not shield him from the struggles of a divided and troubled people. Eliezer's attempts to bring peace and unity were met with rejection and hostility. He strove to live up to the hope his name embodied, but the relentless conflicts, the political ambitions, and the betrayals that arose around him wore down his spirit. The tragic end of Eliezer, as recounted in later interpretations, is one of a gentle soul overwhelmed by the weight of disappointment, a man who, despite his sincere desire to help and to unite, was ultimately crushed by forces larger than himself. His life became a poignant reminder that even when we believe help is near, the challenges of life may still leave us feeling alone and unheard. Together, the tragic fates of Gershom and Eliezer serve as powerful lessons about the consequences of neglecting the inner life of a family. Their sorrowful endings are not just personal misfortunes. They are reflections of the broader struggles faced by a people burdened by the heavy cost of leadership and the pain of unmet expectations. In the long years following Moses' own life, the legacy of his family was marred by divisions, isolation, and a sense of loss that spread through the generations. These tragedies teach us that no matter how great a promise may be, if we do not nurture our hearts and care for one another, even the brightest hopes can end in sorrow. Lessons for today: embracing family, identity, and hope. As we listen to the story of the tragic end of Moses' sons, we are invited to look within ourselves and to reflect on our own lives and relationships. The lessons of Gershom and Eliezer are as important today as they were in ancient times. Their stories call on us to be mindful of the ways in which we care for our families, to recognize the struggles of those who feel lost or isolated, and to remember that every person deserves to be seen and loved for who they are. One of the most important lessons we learn from their lives is the need to create a nurturing environment in our families and communities. When a child feels like a stranger in his own home, when he feels constantly compared to a famous or mighty figure, the pain can be deep and long-lasting. We must remember that every individual is unique, and that each person's worth is not determined by the legacy of those who came before, but by the love and care they receive from those around them. In our families, schools, and neighborhoods, we should strive to build communities where everyone feels valued and where differences are celebrated rather than used to create division. Another lesson from the tragic ends of Moses' sons is the power of hope and faith. Isaac's life taught us that even when we face unimaginable tests, holding on to faith can guide us through the darkest times. Although both Gershom and Eliezer encountered great sorrow, the hope that their names represented, especially in the case of Eliezer, "God is my help," reminds us that divine support is always available. It is up to us to accept that help, to trust that we are not alone even when the road is rough, and to keep our hearts open to the possibility of renewal. Yet another lesson is the importance of unity. The divisions that plagued Moses' family and later his descendants show us that isolation and conflict can slowly erode even the strongest bonds. In our own lives, when we let disagreements and pride separate us from those we love, we risk the same fate. The story of Moses' sons is a call to bridge gaps, to seek reconciliation, and to work together to build a future in which every person is treated as part of one big family. Our modern world, with all its differences and challenges, is in many ways similar to the world that Gershom and Eliezer inhabited. We face pressures to live up to expectations. We sometimes feel lost in the shadow of others, and we often struggle to find a place where we truly belong. Their stories remind us that even when life seems overwhelming, every day is a new opportunity to start fresh, to reach out to someone who is lonely, to forgive a past wrong, and to build a community based on love and respect. The tragic end of Moses' sons is not meant to discourage us. Rather, it is a powerful reminder that every action we take matters. When we choose kindness over anger, when we choose unity over division, we honor the lessons of the past and help create a future filled with hope. The sorrow of Gershom and Eliezer teaches us that neglecting the inner life of our families can have lasting consequences. Their struggles urge us to be vigilant, to nurture the relationships we hold dear, and to always remember that every person deserves a chance to feel loved and accepted. A final reflection: building a brighter future. Now, dear friends, as we bring our long journey through the lives of Moses' sons to a close, let us carry these lessons with us in our hearts. Think of Gershom, who always felt like a stranger, and imagine how we can make sure that no one ever feels alone in our own families and communities. Think of Eliezer, whose gentle hope was overshadowed by conflict, and let his story inspire you to be a peacemaker, to offer forgiveness even when it is hard, and to extend your hand to those in need. Moses' own life was filled with great triumphs and deep sorrows, and his sons inherited not only his legacy, but also the burdens of high expectations and challenging times. Their tragic endings are not just ancient stories. They are mirrors in which we can see the importance of nurturing our inner lives, of building strong bonds, and of keeping the flame of hope alive, even when the night seems darkest. Imagine a world where every person, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, feels at home, a world where every heart is nurtured and every soul is embraced. This is the world we can create if we learn from the lessons of the past. Every kind word, every gentle touch, and every act of forgiveness is like a seed planted in a garden. With care and love, that garden can grow into something beautiful, something that can withstand the storms of life and provide shelter to all who seek refuge. Let us also remember that our challenges today, as in the days of Moses' sons, are opportunities for growth. Even when we face disappointments or feel overwhelmed by the expectations placed on us, we can choose to look for the light, the promise that, even in tragedy, there is hope for renewal. It is through the trials that our true strength is revealed, and it is through overcoming adversity that we become capable of offering the same hope to others. So, my dear friends, as we step forward from this long reflection, let us pledge to honor the memories of Gershom and Eliezer by striving to be kinder, more loving, and more understanding in our own lives. Let us work to build communities where every person feels valued, where the pain of isolation is replaced by the warmth of togetherness, and where the challenges of life are met not with despair, but with a steadfast belief in the possibility of change. Every day is a new beginning. No matter how heavy the past may seem, we always have the chance to start again, to forgive, to love, and to create a future that is brighter than the darkness we have known. The tragic end of Moses' sons is a reminder that even the most sorrowful stories can inspire us to act with compassion and to build bridges where there were once divides. Thank you for joining me on this long journey through the lives and lessons of Moses' sons. May the memory of their struggles guide you to care more deeply for those around you, and may their stories inspire you to seek unity, to extend forgiveness, and to always hold on to hope. Remember, every kind act matters, and every person has the power to bring light into a world that sometimes seems filled with sorrow. As you go about your day, think of the lessons learned from Gershom and Eliezer. Let their memories remind you that no one should ever feel like a stranger in their own home, and that every heart deserves to know the comfort of love and acceptance. Let us all be bearers of hope, sowers of kindness, and builders of a future where every life is cherished. May your heart always be open to the lessons of the past, and may your actions help create a world where the tragedies of yesterday become the stepping stones to a brighter tomorrow. May you find strength in the face of adversity, comfort in the embrace of family and community, and the unyielding belief that even in our darkest moments, there is always a spark of light waiting to ignite a new beginning. Thank you, dear friend, for listening to this very long and thoughtful reflection on the tragic end of Moses' sons. May their stories continue to inspire you, may their lessons guide you, and may you always choose the path of love, unity, and hope. Go forth with a gentle heart and a courageous spirit, knowing that every step you take in kindness makes the world a little bit brighter, a little bit warmer, and a little bit more whole. Final reflection: a journey through the tragic end of Moses' sons and the lessons that endure. As we reach the end of our journey through the lives of Moses' sons, Gershom and Eliezer, we are invited to pause and deeply reflect on all that these ancient stories can teach us. Their tragic endings, though steeped in the context of a long-ago time, carry lessons that resonate across the ages, teaching us about family, identity, responsibility, the burdens of legacy, and the profound need for unity and compassion. In reflecting on their lives, we explore not only their personal struggles and sorrowful fates, but also the wider themes of leadership, faith, and the power of human connection in the face of overwhelming challenges. 1. The weight of legacy and the search for identity. At the heart of the story of Moses' sons lies the struggle to find one's identity amidst an overwhelming legacy. Gershom, whose very name means a stranger there, is a poignant reminder of the challenges faced when one is born into greatness. Growing up as the firstborn of Moses, an extraordinary leader chosen by God, Gershom was constantly compared to his famous father. The shadow of Moses, whose life was filled with miracles, divine encounters, and the burden of leading an entire nation, made it difficult for Gershom to carve out his own space in the world. This struggle is one that many people even today can relate to. The pressure to live up to the expectations set by our parents, our communities, or even by our own inner standards. Gershom's journey reflects the universal search for identity, a quest to be seen and valued for who we truly are, independent of the legends and expectations that surround us. His life teaches us that while a great legacy can be a source of pride, it can also become a heavy burden if one feels unable to step out and express one's own unique self. In our modern lives, we often encounter situations where we feel overshadowed by expectations, whether in our families, at school, or in our workplaces. Gershom's story urges us to seek support from those around us and to recognize that every individual has inherent worth, regardless of the legacy they inherit. It is a call to cultivate environments where each person is encouraged to grow into their own identity, free from the pressure of constant comparison. When we nurture the individuality of each person, we foster a community where diversity is celebrated and every unique light is allowed to shine. 2. The pain of isolation and the need for compassion. Eliezer, whose name means God is my help, presents another aspect of the struggle, one of isolation and the yearning for divine and human assistance in the face of overwhelming challenges. Although his name proclaims a promise of support, the life of Eliezer was marred by conflicts and disappointments that left him feeling alone. His gentle nature, meant to be a beacon of hope, was often overwhelmed by the harsh realities of a divided community and the immense expectations placed upon him. In reflecting on Eliezer's life, we see a universal truth. Even when we believe that help is near, the challenges of life can sometimes isolate us, leaving our hearts burdened with sorrow. The story of Eliezer teaches us that isolation is not merely a physical state, but an emotional one that can sap the strength from our souls. When we do not feel truly connected to our families, communities, or even to our own sense of purpose, we are left vulnerable to despair. This lesson is as relevant today as it was in ancient times. In our fast-paced modern world, many people experience loneliness and isolation, despite being surrounded by others. The digital age, for all its connectivity, can sometimes deepen the sense of disconnection, leaving individuals feeling unheard and unseen. Eliezer's life reminds us of the importance of reaching out, of ensuring that no one in our community feels abandoned. It calls on us to extend a hand of compassion, to create spaces where people can share their burdens, and to remind each other that we are never truly alone. By cultivating empathy and nurturing genuine relationships, we can help to alleviate the isolation that so many experience and create a support network where everyone feels valued. 3. The burdens of leadership and the weight of responsibility. Moses himself was a man of great responsibility, a leader chosen by God to free his people and guide them through the wilderness. However, with such a monumental task came immense pressure and sorrow. This burden was not only borne by Moses, but, in many ways, trickled down to his sons. Gershom and Eliezer, growing up in an environment defined by high expectations and continuous challenges, were not immune to the weight of leadership. The tragic fates of Moses' sons serve as a somber reminder of how the burdens of leadership can affect even those who are not directly in charge. Living in the shadow of an extraordinary leader can mean facing internal battles and the constant pressure to measure up to ideals that seem almost impossible. Their struggles echo the experience of many who, in modern times, are tasked with following in the footsteps of great predecessors or who carry the legacy of families known for remarkable achievements. This reflection teaches us that leadership is not just about the public victories or grand gestures. It is also about the quiet, personal battles that occur behind the scenes, the struggle to maintain one's identity, the effort to foster unity, and the challenge of caring for one's own emotional well-being amidst overwhelming duty. It calls on us to be gentle with ourselves and with others who bear great responsibility. In our communities, we must remember that leaders, no matter how strong they seem, are human. They too need support, compassion, and the space to grow into their roles without being crushed by the weight of expectations. By offering kindness and understanding to those who lead, we contribute to a more compassionate and sustainable way of carrying forward the legacies that define us. 4. The importance of unity in the face of diversity. One of the broader themes that emerges from the stories of Moses' sons is the challenge of maintaining unity within a diverse and often divided community. As the children of Moses, Gershom and Eliezer were part of a larger narrative that involved the entire nation of Israel, a nation that, despite its common heritage, was frequently torn apart by internal strife, political ambition, and cultural differences. This division is a timeless issue. In every community, whether ancient or modern, there are differences of opinion, of background, and of experience. The tragic ends of Moses' sons as reflected in various traditions, point to the dangers of allowing these differences to grow into deep divisions. When a community loses sight of its shared values and common goals, the promise of unity and mutual support can be all too easily broken. Reflecting on this, we are reminded that unity is not something that happens automatically. It must be nurtured and actively maintained. The story of Moses' sons encourages us to work hard to build bridges between people, to celebrate diversity, while also focusing on the common bonds that unite us all. It is a call to create communities where every individual, no matter how different, feels a sense of belonging and purpose. In today's globalized world, where divisions can arise along many lines, be it ethnicity, religion, or socioeconomic status, the lesson is clear. Only through empathy, dialogue, and shared commitment can we overcome the forces that seek to separate us. 5. The power of forgiveness and renewal. An essential part of the lessons drawn from the tragic lives of Moses' sons is the power of forgiveness. In the face of sorrow, isolation, and the heavy burdens of legacy, the possibility of renewal often lies in our ability to forgive ourselves, our families, and even those who have hurt us. While the stories of Gershom and Eliezer are filled with loss and unmet expectations, they also hint at the transformative potential of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a simple or easy act. It requires great courage and strength. It means letting go of anger and resentment and opening one's heart to the possibility of healing. In the narrative of Moses' sons, the hope encapsulated in Eliezer's name, "God is my help," serves as a reminder that divine assistance is available to all who seek it, especially when accompanied by the willingness to forgive. The process of forgiveness can lift the heavy weight of sorrow and allow new growth to emerge from even the most painful experiences. In our lives today, forgiveness remains one of the most powerful tools we have for healing both individual wounds and communal rifts. Whether it is forgiving a friend who has wronged us, reconciling with a family member, or seeking forgiveness for our own mistakes, the act of forgiving can set us free from the chains of the past. The reflection on Moses' sons thus becomes a meditation on the importance of letting go of old grievances, embracing change, and making room for new beginnings. 6. Embracing the journey, learning from pain to build a better future. As we contemplate the tragic ends of Moses' sons, we must also recognize that their stories are part of a much larger tapestry, a tapestry that includes not only sorrow but also hope, resilience, and the promise of renewal. The pain they experienced and the hardships they faced are lessons that can guide us on our own journeys. They remind us that life is filled with challenges, and that every setback can be an opportunity to learn and to grow. In our own lives, we all face moments when the burden seems too heavy, when the promise of a better future feels distant, or when the pain of isolation and loss threatens to overwhelm us. Yet, it is precisely in these moments that we can draw inspiration from the stories of the past. The experiences of Gershom and Eliezer, though marked by tragedy, also point the way toward a future where understanding, empathy, and love prevail. They urge us to take the lessons of our history seriously and to commit ourselves to building a world in which every person feels valued, every wound is tended to, and every broken bond has the opportunity to be mended. Imagine a future where the pain of the past is transformed into the strength for the future. A future where the lessons of ancient tragedies help us to build bridges instead of walls, to cultivate communities based on compassion rather than division, and to cherish every individual as a unique and irreplaceable part of the whole. This is the future that the reflection on Moses' sons calls us to create. It is a future in which the legacy of sorrow is not forgotten, but rather used as a foundation for deeper understanding and greater empathy. 7. A call to action, living the lessons every day. Ultimately, the extended reflection on the tragic end of Moses' sons is not meant to leave us with only a sense of sorrow. Instead, it is a call to action, a call to transform our own lives and our communities by living out the lessons learned from these ancient stories. Every day we are faced with choices that determine not only our own destinies, but also the fate of those around us. By choosing kindness over cruelty, unity over division, and forgiveness over bitterness, we have the power to change our world for the better. Consider how you might apply these lessons in your daily life. Perhaps it means reaching out to someone who is lonely, offering a kind word to a friend in distress, or making an effort to understand a viewpoint that is different from your own. It might mean taking a moment to reflect on your own actions and making a commitment to act with greater compassion and empathy. Each small act of love and each moment of understanding contributes to a larger change. A change that can transform our communities and, ultimately, our world. The legacy of Moses' sons, though tragic, offers us a blueprint for how to live a life of purpose and meaning. It reminds us that even in the face of great sorrow, there is always the possibility of renewal and growth. Every setback, every moment of isolation, and every challenge we encounter is an opportunity to learn, to forgive, and to build a future that is brighter and more compassionate than the past. 8. Embracing our shared humanity. In reflecting on the tragic end of Moses' sons, we also come to see a picture of our shared humanity, a humanity that transcends time, culture, and circumstance. The struggles of Gershom and Eliezer are not isolated to a distant past. They are reflections of the challenges that people everywhere face every day. The search for identity, the pain of isolation, the burdens of leadership, and the need for unity are all themes that resonate in every corner of the world. Our shared humanity means that we all have a stake in the lessons of these ancient stories. Whether we come from a long line of leaders, or we simply live quiet, unremarkable lives, the call to act with compassion and to care for one another is universal. It is a call that reminds us that we are all connected. Each of us is a thread in the rich tapestry of human life, and every action we take has the potential to affect the whole. By embracing our shared humanity, we can work together to create communities that are inclusive, supportive, and resilient. We can celebrate our differences while also recognizing the common ground that unites us all. The desire to be loved, to feel secure, and to know that we belong. The tragic stories of Moses' sons challenge us to look beyond our individual struggles and to see the larger picture, a picture in which every person matters, and where every act of kindness contributes to a more just and compassionate world. 9. Looking forward, the promise of new beginnings. Even as we reflect on the sorrow and the tragedy that marked the lives of Gershom and Eliezer, we must also look forward to the promise of new beginnings. The ancient stories of Moses' sons, with all their pain and their lessons, are not an end in themselves. Rather, they are a stepping stone, a call to learn from the past and to build a future that is filled with hope. New beginnings are born from the courage to forgive, the strength to overcome, and the willingness to work together for a better tomorrow. They are born from the recognition that every day offers a fresh start, a chance to mend broken bonds, to reach out to those who feel alone, and to create a legacy that is defined not by sorrow, but by the enduring power of love. The tragic end of Moses' sons, then, can serve as a catalyst for change, a reminder that while the past may be filled with loss, the future holds the promise of renewal if we choose to act with compassion and unity. 10. A personal invitation to live the lessons. Finally, dear friends, as we conclude this long reflection, I invite you to take these lessons into your own lives. Let the memories of Gershom and Eliezer remind you that no one should ever feel like a stranger in their own home, and that every heart deserves to be nurtured with kindness. Let their stories inspire you to be the light in the darkness, the voice of hope in a time of despair, and the gentle hand that helps mend the fractures in our communities. Every time you choose forgiveness over anger, every time you extend a hand to someone in need, you honor the legacy of those who came before and help build a future where love and unity prevail. Your choices matter. Your actions, no matter how small, contribute to a larger movement toward a more compassionate and understanding world. In the end, the tragic end of Moses' sons is not just a tale of sorrow. It is a timeless reminder that from the deepest pain can arise the greatest strength, and from the darkest moments can emerge the brightest hope. It challenges us to reflect on our own lives, to learn from our mistakes, and to always strive to be better, kinder, and more loving. May you carry this reflection in your heart as a guide that reminds you that every day is a new beginning, that every setback is an opportunity for growth, and that the power of love and unity can overcome even the deepest of sorrows. Let these lessons shape your actions, inform your choices, and inspire you to create a legacy of compassion and hope that will shine for generations to come. Thank you for journeying with me through this long and thoughtful reflection on the tragic end of Moses' sons. May their stories continue to inspire you, may their lessons guide you, and may you always find the strength to embrace every new day with an open heart, ready to build a future filled with light, love, and unity.